artist and director of what I'm going to music group. And that's her daughter, Aileen. So let me just go with an excerpt of a piece that we created last year called Barret, to sleep, and find corporal and spiritual roots. And our piece was inspired by the song I Te Barret, which is in the Cunamacué rhythm. And the piece talks about sweeping injustices and racism for the world. The music was composed by and that was in the tempo rhythm. So right now, what we're going to do is show you a couple of movements from the piece. So with the idea of sweeping and self-cleansing, everybody let's stand up and join us in the movement. It's simple. If you are more comfortable sitting down, you can go sit down. So imagine you have your room with you, yes? So we're going to brush our body all the way from the top of our head, all the way down to the bottom of our feet. Yes, so brush your body. Yes. Now we're only going to brush for 4 counts, and then we'll stop. So think about why you want to brush. You want to brush side to side. You want to brush forward. Yes, think about you want to brush away. Ready, here we go. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll stop here. 4 more breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Now we'll keep our brushing from the waist up. Ready, here we go. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll stop again. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and stop. So next, we're going to find shapes with our body. So think about stillness. Think about eye sculpture. Yes. Ready? So this is my first shape, and I'm going to send the energy out here. Standing right there. We're going to do 2 shapes. My second shape is right here. So you can copy my shape, or you can do your own shape. Maybe you want to be here. I like to do that, sending your foot out into space. Or maybe you want to balance in one leg. Like you're doing about here. Maybe you're reaching up. So we're going to with our shape on count number 4. Ready? Here we go. And 1, 2, 3, straight. And hold it 4 down. Go again. 1, 2, 3, second shape. Yes. So we're doing 4 counts of sweeping, 1 count of breathing. And then 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're doing different brushes, you can do the same brush. And then you hold and you wait. 2, 3, 4, 1. Last time. So again. Ready? Here we go. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold. 2, 3, 4. Yes. Okay. So now we're going to shake it up. So shake your body. Yes. Shake it out. And we're going to keep our shape in our upper body. In our shoulders. Yes. So this is 1. Shoulders are gonna do. They're going from the middle to the back to the middle. Yes. If you want, you can do the same shoulder shake. Or if it's particular, moving your shoulders forward and back, you can try the forward and back.
Hey there, Carmen and Pierre. I'm Aya, co-host for tonight. I just wanted to ask if you could possibly maybe turn off the music in the background. We're having a little bit of a hard time hearing your voices. We're getting nice and warmed up with your dance workshop, but we want to make sure we can hear you loud and clear. And if the music was off, it might help with that. How's that sound?
Okay, maybe we can turn it down a little bit. What do you think about that? Because the music goes with the dance.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you try turning it down? Maybe we'll be able to hear you a little bit better. It's just a little hard to hear your voice. It was a little unclear over the music.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right, see you back here in a sec.
Okay, so we were shaking 4, 4 counts. Maybe I'll get closer too. in our upper body. Yes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4. Last time. Shake. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4. So now we're going to hold our broom or your imaginary broom, and our arm is going to go side, up, shoulder, out, and side, up, shoulder, out again, and side, up, shoulder, out. We're gonna add that to our shoulder shake. So ready, here we go, and 1, oh, I forgot. Ready, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and shake, up, shoulder, out, and shake, up, shoulder, out. Yes. So we're only doing that twice, just like we did right now. Let's try it again. Ready, here we go, and shake, up, shoulder, out, and shake, up, shoulder, out. Yes. So let's tie that to the short phrase we did earlier, which was our sweeping, freezing for 4 counts, sweep again, freeze for 4 counts, and then we shake our shoulders, and we shake it again. Yes, let's just do that. Ready, here we go, and brush, 2, 3, freeze, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, shoulders, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, great job. I hope you enjoy that. So next, we're going to do a demonstration for you of zapateo, which is Afro-Peruvian footwork, and it's making music with your feet.
Okay.
Lo ponemos más adelante, ¿no? Porque ahorita no
No, al contrario. Más atrás. Vamos a verlos. Okay. Hey. 1, 2, 3, go.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that incredible performance with the whole family. Huge thank you to Cunamacué for kicking off a phenomenal 4th volume of Virtual NightLife. I am your host for the evening, Aya, and I'd like to introduce your appropriately nocturnal co-host for the evening. Her name is Secret, and she is a New Caledonian crested gecko. Again, my name is Aya, and I am a human. I'm also a public programs specialist with the California Academy of Sciences. I manage the Naturalist Center, which you may have seen exiting the planetarium. It is the Academy's sort of museum within a museum, full of fun taxidermy activities and natural history collections. It's sort of tucked away in the rafters, so well hidden, and I kind of like to think of it as the Academy's best kept secret. So we may not be able to get together under one roof this evening, but I think recent events have shown us how much we want to. Indeed, these days, togetherness is top of mind for a lot of folks. togetherness both with our fellow humans and with the rest of the natural world. So tonight, we're going to explore that concept of connectedness as it appears in the natural world. We'll get to learn why it is that birds of a feather flock together. We'll get to dive into the networks of Nudibranchs. We'll get to see a short film about connectivity during quarantine. And to top it off, we'll get to consider the culture and ecology of the sweet potato. So grab your quarantini and get comfortable. If you have any questions about Secret or geckos in general, you can put them in the chat. And if we have time, which we may or may not, we'll see if we can answer one or two of them. So with that, I'd like to welcome our first guest, who is Dr. Jack Dumbacher, Curator of Ornithology and Mammalogy at the California Academy of Sciences, and he is going to talk to us all about why it is that birds congregate in groups. Let's hear.
Cool. Thank you, Aya. It's great to be here tonight. My name is Jack Dumbacher. I'm Curator of Birds and Mammals. And tonight, I'm going to be talking about why do birds and other animals flock together. We'll be talking mostly about birds because I'm an ornithologist. That's what I study. Those are the best examples I know of. But in this time when we can't get together, it's nice to remember all the reasons that we do and all the great things that we get out of it. But first, there is a downside to getting together. And oftentimes when you're in a flock or in a large group, you can draw unwanted attention, like predators. When food is scarce, it can make it hard for everyone to find food. And of course, as we all know, it can spread disease when you're in big groups. But there's lots of reasons to get together too. And I've assembled the top 10 reasons why animals get together, why birds flock. And this is number 10. So number 10 is because sometimes space is just limited. So if you think about seabirds that are out at sea, spread over the oceans, foraging for most of their lives, they really only need to come to land when they mate because they need a place to put their egg, right? And they want a rock that's going to be stable, that's not going to have any predators on it. And these oceanic rocks and these breeding colonies aren't that big, and there aren't that many of them, and so they often get filled up with birds. It's basically just because everybody wants to be at the same place. There are other advantages of being there, but one of the main reasons why these areas get so crowded is just because space is limited. So limited space is one reason why birds do get together. Number 9. To fly more efficiently. We've probably all seen these V-shaped formations of birds flying. And if you think about it, if you're flying all by yourself, you've got a lot of drag, a lot of headwind going on. And if you can get into another bird's slipstream, that can make it a lot more efficient for you. And in fact, it's been shown, there's some really cool research on this recently that has shown how the very tips of the birds is where you get a lot of the drag, the tips of the wings of birds. And the wind that spills over the wing of the bird causes these spinning vortices at the tips of the wings. And that birds are actually getting behind the other birds so that they can take advantage of the moving up air from these vortices. And it gives them a little bit of lift, and it also cuts down on their drag a little bit. So that's a huge advantage for these birds that are flying long distances in flocks, so to fly more efficiently. Number 8. So if you thought that this mother had all these chicks, well, you can think again, because what happens a lot of times with ducks, especially ducks and especially diving ducks, is that sometimes those mothers need to go out and get some food, and they don't want to just leave their young. And so in many of these cases, multiple families will get together, and some of the females, the parents will go out and feed, while one mother or a couple of parents will sit back and look after all the young. And these are sometimes called a creche or a nursery. And so caring for young jointly is one of the great advantages of being together in a group. Number 7, to impress the females. So there's some great examples. In fact, these are called leks, where multiple males all get together and they display together on one display ground. They do these amazing dances. They're often choreographed dances where all the males do the same moves at the same time. And then a female, and here's a female right here checking out these males on the lek. If a female is interested in one of the males and the other males can stop dancing, and then that male will do a special dance just for her, she can choose which one of the males she wants to mate with. It's the same with the Rajiana bird of paradise from New Guinea, which is shown here. It's a beautiful bird, and sometimes up to 10 of these birds will be all dancing and displaying in the top of a single tree, trying to impress those females and get a mate. Now, it's interesting because sometimes the males do dance all by themselves, but they never seem to get mates because that's just kind of weird. Number 6, family teamwork. So this is these are acorn woodpeckers that you can see here in California. And in order to have a successful nest, they need a lot of resources. And in fact, they have to gather up acorns that they'll use and that they'll store in trees. You can see all those little holes inside of the trees here where they'll stash acorns. And in order to amass enough acorns and to have a granary big enough to sustain a family and to raise young, it can take many years to put that together, and more individuals than just 2 often. And so many times, the young of a family realize that they could never, that there's not an open space, that there are no open territories, there's no place for them to go. So they prefer to stay home and help their parents raise more young. So they're basically helping their parents raise their younger brothers and sisters. And it turns out that this is a great advantage even to them, because you don't have to have your own copies of your genes make it to the next generation. Your brothers and sisters also have the same genes as you, or many of the same genes as you. And so evolution can still favor that. So this teamwork sometimes is called kin selection, and it still is a great way for these behaviors to evolve and even for these animals to evolve. Number 5, mixed species flocks. In tropical areas, many birds not of the same species will gather together in mixed species flocks and move through the forest. And there's many different reasons why they may do this. One is that there's often a sentry. There's often one species, in this case it's the racket-tailed drongo, which sits higher in the tree and kind of keeps an eye out over things and can see predators coming from further away and has a special sentinel call. So if a predator is coming, it can warn everybody else in the flock. Meanwhile, all those other individuals are down on the forest floor and they're searching for food. And when they find it, they can communicate to the others. And sometimes if they're looking for ants or things like that on the forest floor, when they're down there, they'll scare up other insects that the other birds can get. So it helps them all forage together. Live jamming every day, a lot of these birds will sing together. And in fact, there's evidence that their songs converge on similar patterns and similar sounds. Now this last one, there's not as much scientific support for this, that booze costs are actually split equally, because there's always that one guy who drinks too much and doesn't pay for his own bill. So that one's still out. Number 4, to keep warm. So a lot of birds live in very chilly places like penguins. And in order to keep warm, birds can cuddle together. And who doesn't like to cuddle anyway? Number 3, to mob predators. So oftentimes you get a new neighbor moving into the neighborhood that you don't really want to have down the street. This is the case for when owls or hawks move into a new area, because they will eat the baby birds of crows and ravens and other smaller birds. And so oftentimes what they'll do is that a lot of these birds will gather together, especially crows and ravens, and they'll try and mob and chase off hawks and owls, make it really hard for them to set up a territory and set up their own nests. And if you think that the ravens get the last word, they don't, because the smaller birds don't like ravens and jays for the same reason that ravens and jays don't like owls and hawks. And so even the smaller birds can sometimes chase away crows and ravens. 2, hunting in packs. Think of wolves, right? Wolves do this. A lot of different mammals will hunt in packs, and they can take down prey that no individual could take down by themselves. This is very rare in birds, but there's a great example in the Harris's hawk. And look at these guys over here. These guys just look bad, don't they? They're going to catch something today. But what they do is they'll if they see something, one, they have a lot more eyes so that they can see if there's a snake or a rabbit moving around in the underbrush. And then they'll all fly in as a group. And if the first one that's getting really close and the hare takes a sharp turn and they can't catch it, the other ones will be able to take over where that one missed and continue chasing the prey. And sometimes the prey gets chased into the underbrush and into the bushes, and then they'll send in one of the birds to ruffle the bushes and see if it can scare up the prey, while the other ones are hovering around and ready to chase it when it emerges. So they're able to hunt in packs much like wolves do. Number 1, though, the number 1 reason why birds gather together in flocks is because there's safety in numbers, right? Oftentimes these flocks have these amazing shapes, and if you have never seen this, it's called a murmuration, and just go to YouTube, look up murmuration, and you'll just be mesmerized for hours looking at some of these amazing videos of flocks of birds. But here you can see a peregrine falcon, and it's diving on a flock of birds. They might have been on the ground, but when the peregrine flies over, they take off into the air. And when it dives into them, just like a school of fish, they'll separate and come back together. And it's very dangerous for a peregrine falcon to fly into the flock because it can easily break a wing when it crashes into other birds. And so what it has to try and do is separate a bird or two from the rest of the flock so that it can pick it off. And that's a very hard thing to do. And the birds are able to stay in the flock. And the other advantage, of course, is that there's safety in numbers. If you were the only bird out there, the hawk would get you for sure. But when there's this many, and there's 100,000 birds in a flock, your chance is 1 out of 100,000 of being the one that feeds that hawk today. So there's big safety in numbers, and predator benefits, anti-predator benefits are one of the main reasons why birds flock together. So that's the top 10. And so as you think about this, all these different reasons why birds and other animals flock together, we humans like to do all the same things. We like to gather together. We're not able to now, but soon we'll be able to think of those days when we can get back out onto the streets and go to concerts and go to nightlife in person. And we all look forward to that time. And so I look forward to seeing you all at Nightlife, hopefully in the next few months, and have a great evening and enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you.
All right. Well, geckos might not have feathers. They're covered in scales, like all reptiles. But scales and feathers might actually have more in common than you would think. You can see geckos have really, really, really tiny scales. But both scales and feathers, are made of keratin, a structural protein. They are both coverings for skin designed to protect that skin from UV radiation, from substrate, and from all sorts of other dangers that might be in our environment. And interestingly, fur, hair, scales, feathers, all of these skin products actually arise from the same embryonic structure called placodes, little tiny bumps on the skin of developing embryos of birds, mammals, and reptiles. And those placodes come from a common ancestor shared by all of those lineages. Pretty cool. Well, let's see, who are we going to be learning about next? We are going to be learning about what I consider to be probably the most charismatic gastropod of them all, the butterflies of the sea. That's right, Nudibranchs. We're about to be joined by Dr. Allison Fritts-Penniman, who's going to tell us all about how these animals, tiny invertebrates, stay connected over large tracts of ocean. Following her talk, we'll have a brief intermission, and I'll see you after that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Aya, for the introduction, and for Nightlife for having me tonight. So yeah, I study nudibranchs, and tonight I'm going to talk about how nudibranchs are staying connected over the millions of years when they could be getting isolated. So I'll start, relating it to us. Humans have figured out a pretty good way to stay connected. We groups that originally were getting together in person are now getting together online, and we're a great example of this right now. And it's actually interesting because I think in some ways we're even more connected than we were before, because geography doesn't matter anymore. We can all hang out online no matter where we live. But for other species, geography matters a lot. They can't just go on the internet or hop on a plane. So let's talk about how nudibranchs deal with isolation. So first off, nudibranchs are a group of sea slugs. They are known for their really bright colors. Like Aya said, they kind of get this butterflies of the sea reputation because of that. But they can also be really cryptic and blend in, and you might not even know they're there. Some of them are actually really kind of just mysterious. They have a really strong foot. So the whole bottom part of their body is one big muscle called the foot, and they're able to hold on to wherever they are. So even when ocean currents are blasting by them, a lot of the time they can cling to whatever that surface is that they're living on. And because of this, adult nudibranchs really don't move around that much in the ocean. They tend to have a pretty small home range. The nudibranchs that I've done a lot of research on live on corals. So this one here is called Fistula minor. And they prefer to just stay on one coral once they've found it. So they really are experts at sheltering in place because they'll just stay on that coral. It provides food for them. It provides shelter from predators so they can hide under the coral. And they really have no reason to leave. So they would be totally happy being in quarantine because they really have nothing better to do. And they also naturally tend to settle together on corals so they can find a mate without leaving their coral. And yet, despite having such small home ranges, they tend to have really large species ranges. So for example, Fistula lugubris, which here I'm showing you the range just based on iNaturalist observations, which isn't very many. But you can see that just on that, we've got samples all the way from the Western Indian Ocean in Tanzania all the way across to off the coast of Mexico. So this one species can live across 2 oceans and somehow is maintaining connectivity. Or is it? So my research was looking at several different species of these coral-feeding nudibranchs and figuring out, okay, are they actually connected to each other or are they diverging? So I'm going to show you a comparison between 2 species, Fistula minor and Fistula lugubris. They both have the same life history of living on that one coral their whole life. They will mate and lay their eggs on that coral. And my question was whether or not these species can actually maintain connectivity across those huge ocean ranges. And I'll tell you a little bit about a population genetics technique that we use to answer this question. So there's this idea of isolation by distance, where populations that are farther away from each other should have less gene flow and be more genetically different from each other. And there can be other barriers to gene flow as well that contribute to this isolation. And so we can go out in nature and kind of try to observe this isolation by sampling from a bunch of different locations and sequencing DNA. And what I'm going to show you is just a really simple technique where you sequence one gene and you look at these sequences that are called haplotypes and you compare haplotypes from different locations. So I'm just going to show you a quick method. So a haplotype network is how we visualize this isolation. So in this example, every circle is a different haplotype or a DNA sequence. And the size of the circle shows how many individuals had the exact same DNA sequence haplotype. So the bigger circle has 8 to 10 individuals that all had the same sequence. The smaller circles are just one individual each. And then the colors show where those individuals live. So you can see in this bigger circle, they came from 6 different locations. Whereas each of the single circles, the smaller circles just have one location. And then the lines connect sequences that are similar to each other. So you can make a network map that shows genetic similarity between different individuals. Okay, so I did this with my 2 species. And first we'll look at Fistula minor. And so I just sampled across Indonesia. That's what I'll show you first. So I use this rainbow color code where we've got all the way on the west side is the red part of the rainbow, all the way on the east side of Indonesia goes to purple. And you can see in this network that the orange and red populations from the west are genetically isolated from the others. So they have a cluster of haplotypes that are really different genetically from the other ones. But if you look over at Fistula lugubris, you actually see a different pattern. So same sampling locations, but actually there's no pattern. It's a complete lack of relationship between the genetic information and where they came from. you can see that individuals from the west and the east all have the same haplotypes. So it really just kind of looks like a rainbow barfed all over my graph, which is kind of how some nudibranchs look as well. Some of the best nudibranchs look like a rainbow barfed on them. So Physalia lugubris is a little bit unique in the sense that it shows no genetic isolation. And so I looked far and wide, east and west. I went on an expedition with Cal Academy to Tanzania, sampled both of these species there. I also got museum specimens from Mexico. And Physalia lugubris amazingly maintains connectivity across this entire range of 2 oceans. So what is so special about this animal? How is it able to do that if their adults are just sheltering in place all the time? Well, you may remember from Finding Nemo that we have these things called currents. It's not that crazy of a concept for marine animals to travel long distances throughout the oceans, but it is kind of rare for adults. It's very weird for Nemo and Dory to actually be going on a current like this. There are large mammals and sea turtles that do it, but for the most part, currents are occupied by plankton. And there's a lot of animals that have larvae that are plankton. So here we have a starfish, a crab, sea urchin, a snail, and all of these amazing plankton are kind of at the whim of the ocean currents. So they can end up traveling pretty far. And nudibranchs, like Physalia lugubris, have larvae that will travel in the currents. And their larvae are special because they can actually feed while traveling. So we call that planktotrophic. And they actually last really long too. So these larvae can go for 30 days in the ocean, get all the way across the Pacific. And they won't settle until they smell the species of coral that they want to settle on. So they can really end up being really well connected across really long distances. And it's the young of the species that are keeping them connected, which I think is a fun parallel to humans because, these days, the younger you are, the more social media you're on and really keeping humans connected as well. So that's what I've got about nudibranchs. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your nightlife.
Woohoo! All right. That was relaxing, huh? It's nice to be back at the Academy for a moment, even if just from a screen. So, I figured if we're going to answer one question about geckos, it would probably have to be about their very special ability, the one they're notorious for, climbing on vertical surfaces or even hanging upside down. Seems like science fiction, but the science fact behind that really cool ability is van der Waals forces. That's right, van der Waals for sticking on the wall. It's a weak electromagnetic attraction between atoms or molecules, but it only kicks in at really, really close proximity. So even surfaces that seem smooth to us are covered in crevices and curvature, even if we can't see it. So if I was to take my hand and push it as hard as I could against my computer screen, I actually wouldn't be able to get enough contact with enough surface area on my hand and the screen in order for those van der Waals to really take effect. But geckos can do it. So how? Now, what they do is increase the surface area that they have available. They increase it vastly. So we actually have a photo of a nice little gecko nap that I bet we can put up here on the screen. And if you take a nice close look at the bottoms of their feet, you can see tiny little folds. And on those folds are hairs. And you guessed it, on the hairs are more hairs. So those hairs with hairs kind of look like weird toothbrushes. Now, all of that surface area provides a lot of extra capacity to sort of squish around any unevenness in surfaces and get the two surfaces close enough, the gecko's hand and the wall or the container, for those van der Waals forces to take effect. Pretty cool. Now, we might not be able to take a vertical nap like a gecko, but let's sit back and relax, because next up is a screening of a short film by California-based artist and filmmaker Ivan Cash called A Social Distance.
Hello, my name is Peng and I'm from China.
Hi, I'm Luisa from Italy.
My name is Marcel Ndiaye and I'm from France.
I'm from Iran.
I live in New York City.
And I'm from Barcelona.
And this is my cat Louis.
My name's James. I'm from Australia.
I'm from Ghana.
I'm from Brazil.
I am from Malaysia.
And I'm from India. And the COVID-19 lockdown is making me feel pretty stressed out.
I feel overwhelmed.
Uncertain.
Isolated.
And I feel unbalanced.
Powerless. Detached.
Feeling a little bit anxious.
I'm just filming.
That's filming.
I feel scared but hopeful.
I'm feeling optimistic.
I'm feeling resilient and determined.
And I feel calm.
I am happy.
And hope you guys feel good too. Take care.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in and thanks for having me, Academy of Sciences. My name's Ivan, and yeah, nice to share that film with you, and cool to have our humanity as fellow humans and animals that we are scheduled into the evening. I wanted to share a quick presentation about how the film came to life, and then I'm happy to answer some questions. So bear with me, I'm going to share my screen here. Cool. So I was inspired to make this film after realizing, I guess it was right after California had an official lockdown, and I realized that as isolating as it was, there was something really fascinating about the fact that, you know, people all around the world are united in our isolation. That, like, even though it feels very lonely and personal, it's actually something that we're all sharing. Even, you know, the couple hundred people that are tuning in right now, we're all tuning in from our respective homes. And so the idea was to share that and think about, okay, what ways can people express themselves through that? So I want to share with you the process through which this film was made. At first, it was a matter of thinking about, okay, what kind of prompts would be relevant to this current time, and what is also achievable, not just for, you know, my filmmaker friends, but for people all around the world, you know, many of whom the best camera they have is a phone. And so we asked people to wear all black, to film vertically, to film during the day so that they had good light. And then we really kind of spelled it out for them as much as possible and really tried to create as much parameter as we could. So inviting people to share how they felt, asking them to take a portrait of themselves in these different ways, asking them to put on and off their mask. Shooting out their window was, I think it's something that we've probably all seen by now, is different people's windows from around the world. And that was probably the most meaningful moment for me as the filmmaker, was being able to, the first submission we received was from a young man in Indonesia, and who I had no idea who he was, and being able to kind of tap into his world, see his home, and then see out his window was really profound and meaningful. And so we were asking people to do this. This was kind of a fun concept of trying to get people to do a virtual pound by, you know, pounding the side of their screen. I was really fascinated by inviting people to open up their fridge and, you know, seeing both fridges that were full as well as ones that were more empty, and just the humanity in that, and the fragility in that. Of course, we've all been washing our hands a ton, so that felt important. And yeah, so at the end of the day, oh, and then also I want to just take a moment to say the music was composed by a Los Angeles-based musician, but then all of the parts were played by different people around the world. Before I forget, this was made possible with a very generous team. Everyone was working on it pro bono as a passion project. So it was 15 people that came together to make this film. And we received submissions from over 100 people from over 30 countries. And I've got some learnings to share, but maybe I'll go back and just see what questions are coming in. So someone's asking what program we used for editing. We worked with an editor named Blake Bogosian, and he used Premiere Pro, I'm guessing. Someone's asking, how do we recruit participants? We did a combination of an email newsletter blast. If you're interested in projects like this, you can sign up for my newsletter, which is on my website, ivancash.com. And also like shared it on social media and just said, hey, we're making a film about social isolation. We'd love to have people involved. Just looking at other questions. Let's see. Someone asked it. Someone says it should be a music video. I agree. The choreographer who I partnered with was recently collaborated with Kanye West on his opera, and so we're thinking that this might be a Kanye collaboration coming up. And a couple other learnings were that you know, as simple in some ways as this film was in terms of what we asked from people, that just seeing these really simple gestures of opening a fridge, looking out the window was really powerful, and kind of gave insight into, you know, the human condition that we're all dealing with. Another person's asking to see outside my window, and I feel like that's probably a fair request. So I'm out in Joshua Tree. And here's my desk, which is really messy. Just to get super real with y'all. Someone is asking what's the hardest thing that we had to leave out while editing. And, you know, I think that in any sort of creative process, it's always tricky to know what you keep in and what you take out. There were like innumerous moments that the whole team fell in love with, and that we had to, you know, just trim so that the film stayed watchable. I think the hardest part was that our friends and family also participated, and we weren't able to include everyone as best as we tried. And so like my parents both took the time to make submissions, and neither of them are in the film. Sorry, Mom and Dad. Someone's asking what were a few things that surprised me the most, something I didn't expect. There was a lot of creativity in how people answered the submissions, in terms of like just very simple prompts. Like one of the prompts, we didn't show this in the film, but we asked people to hold a flag up, and one guy from Italy made a flag out of different colored books that he had, like a, you know, red, green, and white books, and kind of stacked them together to create a flag, which was cool. And it feels like a cliche, but honestly, I was most surprised that I still remember the first submission, this guy from Indonesia, and how surprisingly intimate it felt just to get into like someone across the world's home and realize like, holy shit, they're going through the same exact thing. And maybe I was also surprised with how well the music came together. I think that's one of the strongest parts of the film. Someone's asking, how did your sense of what the sequence would look like change after you got the footage back? So we worked with an editor intentionally to have an additional perspective. And so we really only knew that we wanted to, and actually it was his idea to ask people to stay how they felt, which I thought was really smart. And then it was his idea to start it with people saying how they were feeling that was a little bit more pessimistic or negative, or just kind of like razzled. And then his idea to end it on a more hopeful note, which I thought was really strong. Another question. Besides the fact that everybody was isolated, what did a lot of people have in common beyond that? I mean, I think the fact that everyone had the ability to, document themselves is pretty radical. And, 10, 20 years ago, that certainly wouldn't be the case around the world. Otherwise, I think that like the isolation was kind of the main thing. And I feel like we gave such tight parameters that it was really a matter of people just like going in and checking the box. Which footage person made me the most emotional? I feel like half the people that watched this, yourselves included, probably really appreciated the 93-year-old woman from Malaysia. She's definitely I don't feel bad choosing a favorite in this case because she was our eldest participant. And it warms my heart that we were able to get someone that has lived such, clearly anyone that lives to their 90s has gone through adversity. And so it felt really powerful to have someone with that kind of background, just like context and history to participate in this like new media film. Okay, a couple more minutes. Will you do another film while under quarantine? Good question. Yes. The next film that I'm doing is documenting a creative performance in Los Angeles that will be done very safe and very socially distant. And hopefully it will be the start of ways in which live performance and live art can come into fruition during this time without compromising health, which is obviously needs to be prioritized and most important. What else? Looking at my notes. Do you have outtakes that we'll share? We have a hard drive filled with literally hundreds of hours of footage from people. And actually, that's a good reminder because when we first did it, I was really mesmerized by the sequences of just people washing their hands for like 3 minutes on end, like just a sequence of hands washing, and then just a sequence of like out the window. And I totally had forgotten about that, but I'm absolutely going to. If you follow me on Instagram, it's Ivan 3_ Cash. That's actually on my to-do list, and I'm going to do that this weekend and just start sharing kind of like the unedited sequences. So yeah, thanks for that reminder. What else? And maybe just as a sidebar, and Joshua Tree, I've been really enjoying slowing down and spending time with the animals out here. I've, in the last week alone, seen coyotes and a rosy boa and a gopher snake and a scorpion and lots of other animals. So appreciate nature and appreciate nightlife, and thanks for tuning in, everyone, and thanks for having me.
Wow, thank you so much, Ivan. What an incredible sort of juxtaposition of togetherness across such distance and such differences. Really cool. Well, now our next guests are going to be changing up our pace a little bit. They're going to be talking about living things more on the plant side of life. And as much as I love geckos, I gotta say, I love plants more. Shh, don't tell secret. She's right here, getting ready for her dinner. Anyhow, Plant Nerd over here is really excited for our final guests tonight, Jocelyn Jackson and Aileen Suzara from the People's Kitchen Collective and Sariwa. They will be shedding some light for us on the soul of a sweet potato indeed togetherness, and communications is by no means just an animal thing. Plants have a striking vocabulary of chemical signals that is utterly incredible, transmitted through air or mycorrhizal networks, coordinating massed fruiting events where all the trees reproduce and create fruit at once, or communicating pest attacks, or even sharing nutrients. So really excited to hear a little bit about how plants of the world can bring us together at the table, or of course, underneath the roof. With that, I think I'll pass it over to Jocelyn and Aileen. Take it away.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
We're
Good
so
evening.
excited by technology right now.
We are so pleased to be part of this. This is so heartwarming. We've been eagerly anticipating this for a while and are just so deeply thankful for the invitation to join this lineup tonight.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where we get to do it together at a distance. Presently, I'm in Nevada and Aileen is in the Bay Area. And so it's a really sweet thing to be able to be with all of you from afar, but always together. And I'd just like to say, my name is Jocelyn Jackson. I'm one of the 3 co-founders of People's Kitchen Collective, which is a social art and food and justice, social justice project in West Oakland primarily, but in the Bay Area and nationally and internationally. And I'm also the founder of Justice Kitchen, which is a sweet food project that I began and that really tends to the hearts and souls, primarily of Black women as they're in their path to healing food experiences that include ecological, cultural, and sacred practices. Aileen, tell us about you.
Hi, it's writing in from the Bay Area. I am a huge fan of Jocelyn, one of the main reasons why I'm here tonight. I'm a longtime fan of People's Kitchen Collective, and I have a sweet food project called Sariwa, which means fresh in Filipino. And what that project is about is really channeling ancestral knowledge. Food is medicine that's rooted in culture, and finding ways to celebrate. And, I think, as people who are deeply involved with food, which in essence is really any of us, really, so much of food is about these in-person experiences. So as we were approaching tonight, Jocelyn and I were really pondering on this question on how do you channel the spirit of togetherness, which is so intrinsic to a lot of the work that we do, even when we might be physically distanced, which kind of took us to the theme of where we went with this.
It really has. I really love this idea of food being so cross-cultural and so important to so many different peoples around the world. And we had the pleasure of being here with our sweet potatoes. And this little one is sprouting its slips, and it is, let's see, 2 weeks old. And so we get to be with these sweet potatoes 2 weeks and
oh, are we catching the magic?
Oh!
This took us a little while. This little buddy here is about a month old. So the middle of our shelter in place, just felt deeply called to take some of the sweet potatoes that were just in our cupboard, start to resuscitate, whether you learned it in a kindergarten, biology project, or maybe it was something that you did with growing food. Just really wanted to channel that and have honestly been astounded. And I'm gonna plant nerd out here, just astounded, I think, by something that will never completely grow old, right, Jocelyn?
Yeah,
just
exactly.
The wonder that you can have one tuber and it's going to grow a family of plants right here and root so well.
And that's the opportunity of this moment for us to have such much deeper relationship with our food. What is possible during pandemic and during shelter in place is to be in deeper relationship. with the food that we eat. And not only are we eating it, but it's also a story. There's so much that comes with a plate of food, and story is a big part of that. And that context is one of the parts that we want to speak to as well. You know, I have this sweet experience of really loving sweet potato based on a tradition in my family. We have sweet potato pie every Thanksgiving, and that is a direct result of having ancestors that traveled from the Great South to Kansas, where I'm from. And even to this day, my uncle, he makes the sweet potato pie every year, even after my grandma passed away. And it's just a beautiful tradition that I love, and makes it even more powerful that I get to grow this plant now. And with that sweet potato pie is also so much more history. Once you start at the very first thread of the tapestry of an ingredient or food or a recipe, so much more is revealed. And part of that story for me is another person from Kansas, who is George Washington Carver. Many of you know about him because of his amazing work with peanuts. It was a crop that really revitalized the soil that was really brutalized by the intensive production of cotton during a time when slave labor was used. And it feels like such a incredible moment when a little kid from Kansas grows up to go to college, insisted on finding a place that would accept him to college. Was started, studying art and piano, and then turned to botany and agriculture, and worked alongside Booker T. Washington at the Tuskegee Institute. What people don't know often is that it wasn't just peanuts. It was peanuts and soybeans and also sweet potatoes. And he found over 100 uses for this sweet potato right here, over 100 uses. And so I'm just in love with that perspective of possibility when it comes to the plants that we enjoy for these family traditions, but also for the possibility of upliftment for an entire community.
So rich, Jocelyn. One of the things I really treasure, of getting to be in conversation around this, Jocelyn, and for everyone listening is, when you begin to peel back these stories, you can find connections that are both very deeply personal and also part of these very vast collective histories of journeying, things that are embodied very much in these plants. And, while Jocelyn and I were preparing and talking, it started to jog these memories for me too around, from my own roots, what are ways that I've experienced the sweet potato. And growing up in Hawaii, I remembered eating these deeply colored lavender Okinawan sweet potatoes that were there. Learning that sweet potato was one of the original canoe crops that had traveled across Polynesia and came to those shores. And then also rooting into my Filipino background and Philippine roots, where it wasn't actually until I was an adult that I learned that kamote, which is the Filipino or Tagalog word for sweet potato, is actually from Nahuatl. I was like, how did that happen? Began to peel back these layers of language to realize that within a single plant, there are so many centuries and so many generations of people who have invested love and care into its cultivation and preservation and diversification too. And as we share, I can't even imagine, with how many species of sweet potatoes are, how many more thousands of recipes and preparations there might be across the world. And one thing I did want to bring up that I was remembering recently, while these shoots are growing, is that the leaves are also edible, and I think that often comes off the radar of, you have this nutritious, sweet, creamy flesh, but you also have another source of food, which is these abundant shoots and runners that grow from it.
It's a plant that just doesn't know how to stop giving.
It just does not know how to stop giving.
And it's really sweet. And I'm seeing some people here that I just want to name because it's so nice that they're here. Beverly and Roxana, Jonathan, I see you there. Jose, Ivan, Jan, Jan's my sister. She's here. It's really great to see community show up. We love being able to connect with you in this way. And we look forward to hearing your stories too. It is, really quickly, Beverly is sharing that she grew up eating camote tops long before I realized I could eat the tuber too.
Yes.
So she got the greens before the tuber. I love that. Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you, Beverly.
And it's one of those things where we want to keep this going. We know we only have a couple of minutes left. So we want to share with you some opportunities for us to stay connected. And although we weren't able to cook with you and feed you, we did offer some things to share. This is a sweet potato pie that I just made today with fresh roasted sweet potatoes. It's a miniature size for many reasons, another story. But this sweet potato recipe is available to you. They will be providing that link in a moment in the notes so that you can click on that. What's also provided is a recipe for Sweetheart Sweet Potato Biscuits, which is a tradition of People's Kitchen Collective at the Life is Living Festival each year. We honor the Black Panther Party free breakfast program by baking hundreds of these biscuits in a heart shape, just to be able to honor that legacy that means so much to revolutionary perspective of what food does for community. And we also have another recipe. Tell us, Aileen.
Yes, thank you. People, don't miss out. I love these recipes, and those sweet potato biscuits are forever burned into my memory. It's one of the best things I've ever eaten. I did include a recipe that's close to my heart. It is for ukoi, which is a crispy fritter. I think we are allowed fried comfort here and there, and it is one way of, of being able to make some savory bites of ukoi, and you can add in the leaves too. So recipes are all included.
And like I said, that link will be provided to you all, and it is also part of our social media. Feel free to go to our IG pages to find out more details. Please cook these recipes. My goodness, the ukoi is delicious. We had it in the middle of a garden once, and Aileen taught me how to make it. And the little ones as well were there making it. So we'd love to continue that tradition. Please go ahead and follow us into Instagram and all the other socials to learn more and be in community with us as we are continuing to have these conversations and relationships with the ingredients that make the most sense and truth in our lives because of their cultural significance, their ecological meaning, and their sacred presence in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And Aileen, shall we say thank you and goodbye? Are we at that time?
I think I heard a bell, but
okay.
Thank you and goodbye for now, because we are going to stay connected and in togetherness with our sweet potato love.
And a little song to end, because that's also a family tradition.
Yes.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it's found. Blessings on each of you. Enjoy your sweet potatoes. Enjoy all the beauty that you're able to find each day. We are here with you. We are together in this experience. And I'm so grateful that we have that to count on and to rely on.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, Aileen and Jocelyn, for sharing. Oh, wow. You talked about one particular hero of mine, Dr. George Washington Carver, and reminded me of another hero, Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, author of Braiding Sweetgrass. Your stories about how plants that we use in our everyday lives not only connect us to one another, but also to the land. Those stories reminded me of something that Robin wrote about in her book, her story of tapping maples for the first time, and how she was so moved to see her daughters with their mouths at the little spout coming out of the maple tree, and she said she was so moved because it used to be her that was the only one who fed her children, and now it's the earth through the plants and the animals that help us to live. So Thank you so much for that. And thank you everyone for joining us for Virtual NightLife Volume 4, Exploring a World of Togetherness this week. Nightlife is here for you every week, Thursdays at 7. Virtual NightLife will be back in 2 weeks, bringing tales of outdoor adventure to your screen. Then Night School will be airing next week, and we'll be giving a virtual tour of the universe thanks to our planetarium team at the California Academy of Sciences. So thank you everybody again for all of your questions and participation. We look forward to being together with you under the living roof at the Academy soon. So take care and good night.